You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Knezik.
Welcome to our first roundtable episode of the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast presented by Pinelands Nursery. I am Fran Chismar.
And I'm Tom Knezik. And we've been talking about this for a while, and we are finally doing it. New year, new us.
Yeah.
And you can see us.
You can see us. Hello,
if you're watching on YouTube, you can see us. So that means, Fran, no pens up your noses.
I have to watch my facial expressions.
Yeah, you really gotta pay attention.
I can't make faces. So we have to make sure we're paying attention.
Yeah. Can't doze off. I had to move everything off my desk so I can't fidget with anything like I usually do. So.
Yeah. It's funny because with this episode, what took so long was we needed to make sure it was a slow time of the year for us to really organize this, but we really had trouble deciding which one to do first. There were so many discussions that we wanted to have, and we couldn't really decide on which one.
Yeah, it was tricky because, like we've talked about, doing one on foraging, doing one on mitigation banking, just the business of restoration, different kinds of gardens, all that kind of stuff. But we decided to choose one selfishly instead. Yeah,
we wanted to do one that we could talk intelligently about, and even that for me is 50-50. So I think the bigger discussion was even more so than which one were we going to do is what were we going to call it. When it's just you and I, it's the buzz. And there's really no name for when we have a guest on. It's just the normal podcast.
Yeah, that was just how we started.
Yeah.
So that's the overarching brand.
Yeah. But this one, we finally agreed on a name.
Yeah. I can't remember some of the bad ones.
There were some, because I threw out a ton.
I was thinking even one was like Buds on Buds. I'm like, that might not be good.
Yeah, I was just throwing a ton of stuff out there to see what sticks.
Yeah, but then we ended up deciding on Rooted Discussions.
Yeah, I really like that one. I really like that one.
It definitely gets through the seriousness of some of the stuff that we're talking about, even though we're still talking with a lot of our friends and people we know, and it's still gonna be fun, but we're gonna have tackle some serious topics. So
I think this opens us up too. So our theme music today is we're deciding to use some music from RJ Comer that we also is new music for us for the Buzz, our most recent winner, but we want to make sure that we open the theme music competition back up to someone new. We want to give roundtable discussions their own identity. So we're hoping that if you want to submit original theme music that we can use for just the roundtable or the rooted discussions, make sure you email it to us at info@nativeplantshealthyplanet.com.
And we've really been lucky to have 2 submissions so far, and both of them be really, really good. So I'm expecting, I have high hopes for our next or theme music for this as well.
I do too. I'm so out of sorts. Typically I'm looking at our notes on the laptop, but now it's filming, so I can't. At you. The laptop's looking at me, so I have everything written down, and I'm like, I got to change. It's time for me to switch papers.
But can
our guests hear us during this? And they're in the waiting room? No.
Yeah, we could say whatever we want. As far as I know, they're gonna let us know as we bring them in one by one. We have a really good lineup for you today, not just of native plant nurseries, but also good friends of ours. So with that, we're going to start
open it up. Bring them in.
Quick introduction.
Let's see how we do with this. Oh, there we go.
All right.
Hello,
Steve, you're there, right?
I am here.
Could you hear us while you were in the waiting room?
No.
Okay. We were just curious.
No, I was just hanging out, making sure I wasn't picking my nose or something. No. It's like, when is it going to come on? Who's going to be first?
But Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from and about your nursery?
My name is Steve Cascarani, and I'm the president, CEO of North Creek Nurseries. We are a wholesale plant propagation nursery that focuses on perennials, grasses, and ferns, primarily some vines, with an emphasis on Eastern regional native plants. as a mouthful, but so we grow native plants and also some non-native plants. Probably 85% of our palette is native. We also grow native plant cultivars, but we differentiate, what they are by propagation type.
Okay.
So we sell to wholesale growers, we sell to restoration projects, and we can differentiate our product line depending on the use of the plant. So if it's going into a suburban landscape or an urban landscape, and it's entry level in that way, as far as it's not a restoration project, then where cultivars would be more appropriate. But we still look for plants with ecological value, whether they're great for pollinators, or they're stormwater reclamation items for rain gardens and vegetative swales and constructed wetlands and such.
I think it's important to point out too for our listeners, and correct me if I get it wrong, but you're co-founder of the American Beauties line, correct?
We are co-founders of the American Beauties line. That is now been quite a while. I think we started in 2004. And we have 5 growers currently. One of the growers is going to be one of your guests today.
I didn't realize it was only 5 growers. Yeah. I think I was assuming it was more than that.
It's been a few more. We launched it, and then the recession hit, and then we lost a couple of growers, and things changed. A couple people went out of business or changed their business model. And interestingly enough, starting, North Creek is 34 years old. So we started as a propagation nursery, and we grow liners. We were wholesale. Plugs, and then in around 2000 or so, we pioneered the landscape plugs and brought those into the market, where larger, smaller plants in larger quantity could be planted in the landscapes. So we differentiate our markets in the fact that probably 70% of our plants roughly go to people that pot them up and resell them in one way or another, whether landscapes or to retail. The other 15 or so, or 20% now, maybe actually closer to 30, will go into landscape, and it will be direct into the landscape for the restoration projects, meadows, and such like that.
Now, you alluded to 2 of our other guests, so
before you go on, I just want to say, because I'd be remiss not to mention this. I feel very fortunate today. We have what we consider our colleagues on, but Steve, to me, is someone that I really look up to in the industry.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm really honored that you're here with us today. So you're one of, you're not that I'm putting anyone above anyone else, but you're just someone that we look up to in this industry.
There's a reason we brought you on first.
Yes.
Well, I've been around a long time. I guess this age has something to do with it, maybe.
No.
But now, what I wanted to make that one last point is that we started out in the native plant market back in 88, and especially trying to get native plants mainstreamed into conventional horticulture. It's kind of been one of our missions. It's easy to sell native plants to native plant enthusiasts or native plant fundamentalists. People that really want native plants in the landscape. Bridging that gap and getting native plants into the hands of the initiated, it's been difficult. And then when you look at what was happening in the late 80s, early 90s, I'm happy to be here to have survived 34 years. And in the last 10 years or so, native plants have found their niche, and we always knew they had that purpose, but the broader audience is understanding, accepting, and asking. So we're really fortunate, and that's given legs to the American Beauties program, because we're touching the entry-level gardeners at retail or making plants. One of the biggest questions that came to us early on, and I do own a retail store too, so I had that kind of experience from owning Gateway Garden Center, is that people would come in and ask for native plants, and we would sell them, but they weren't branded. People didn't know one from the other. And more and more as time went on, there's been more interest and just making them more available. So we get that question: where can I buy native plants?
We get it all the time. It's, it's even for us, the difference was really the last 10 years, like you were saying, that 10 to 12 years is really where we saw the difference and the market starting to change. But it's really the educational part. We preach all the time. We have to make the circle larger. It's great that we have good customers and people that love and preach this, but it doesn't work if it doesn't become larger, and that's.
I think that's what, one of the reasons Daryl and Carrie kind of came into it with their business, and they were actively very interested as they started their business. They were growing natives, but they felt that it was a good fit for them. When you bring them on, I'm sure they'll kind of back up what I'm talking about.
Bring them on now.
Yeah, as a new business, they could have grown anything.
Anything, and they're very good growers. So for sure,
here they are. Carrie and Daryl, I don't know if we see on the same screen.
All right, here you go. Daryl's coming up now. All right, there we go. Hey guys, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. So if you could just introduce yourself and explain who you are, what you do, what your business is, a little bit about your business. If you want to take turns, I don't.
I'll start. I'm Daryl Kabeski, co-owner of Sunset Farmstead. We started this a few years ago, really just focusing on growing plants for pollinators, and really turned into focusing on native plants and for pollinators with what they provide for our ecosystem is really our main focus in what we do.
Now, the two of you actually come from different backgrounds. Daryl, what were you doing before the two of you started the nursery?
Before I was working at another wholesale nursery as our production manager.
Okay. And Karen?
Actually, I was also working at
I forgot you were working.
nursery.
I forgot.
Went to the same school.
I already committed to not editing anything out, so I have to leave that in.
We've known each other longer than our spouses.
But you're both landscape architects, also, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
That's what I was alluding to. So we were just saying before we brought you on that as a new nursery, you could have grown anything you wanted. You could have gone in any direction, but you chose the direction that you chose. Can you talk a little bit about what you're growing and why you went in that direction?
Let me go. Okay. We are growing specifically plants for pollinators, whether that's a food source or habitat. We decided that of all the things that we could grow, we really wanted to focus in on that, since it is a conversation a lot of people are having at multiple levels. The importance of pollinators is something we felt strongly about. So it seemed to make sense. And we didn't really know of another nursery that was only growing pollinator plants. So we thought, well, that can be the thing that we do.
And what sizes are you growing? And who's your main customer base for that? And if you're wholesale or retail?
You go to that.
Our customer base is mostly independent garden centers and landscape contractors, and everything's in a 1 gallon. The other thing that was important to us with doing this was to do it as sustainably as possible. Now I have 2 young kids. Carrie has a
Middle school
daughter. So it was being able to have them out and play in the puddles and not have to worry about what might be in that puddle. So we can honestly say we have not sprayed anything on the farm since we started this.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic. I don't think there's too many people that can make that claim.
Definitely.
I'm proud of that.
All right. And now our last guest today.
Yes.
This will give us the full 6 screen.
There we go. The Brady Bunch. We're all in.
John, how are you doing?
Hey guys, glad to be here. How y'all doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for taking some time out today to be with us. If you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your business, what you're growing, what sizes you're growing, who your customer base is.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's John Mark Courtney. I am the owner and grower here at Kind Earth Growers in Ottsville, Pennsylvania. We're a smaller nursery, and we specialize in open pollinated seed-grown aquatic and wetland perennials, along with a couple other upland species, mostly to give us a nice list of plants that help to create diverse habitats.
Awesome.
We're plug producer, 72s for all of our obligate species, specifically the aquatics. And then we also get into some deep 50s or landscape plugs for some of our drier site species.
Fantastic. And where's the bulk of your material going?
I would say it's probably a lot of it's local contractors for stormwater management and for retention and detention basins. But we also supply other nurseries that are restoration driven to upsize into quarts or gallons, what have you, for different different jobs. So,
awesome. And I think it's fair to say you're a relatively new business owner.
Yep, we are out in 2017.
Yeah. So congratulations.
Thank you much. Thank you.
So, Tom, you want to kick it off now that everyone's here and introduced?
I'll say to all our listeners, one of the reasons that we chose this group is, and Fran and I mentioned it before, that the native plant industry, I'd even say the nursery industry to an extent, is pretty unique, that a lot of the competitors kind of find their little niche, but they tend to be friendly with each other.
Yeah.
For the most part, not everyone, but for the most part. And this group is all very friendly with each other, as we've seen that we all kind of even work together in a way. And there's stuff that I know North Creek is buying from John, and Daryl's buying some stuff from us, and it's a little bit of going back and forth.
Daryl and Carrie are growing American Beauties, which is a program that Steve helped co-found. So it's we could have easily have had 20 other people on here with us, but this is our first go round.
And I'll apologize to all the listeners from outside the Mid-Atlantic, but we're probably all within an hour and a half of each other. So our listeners in Washington and Oregon, we'll have to cover you guys later.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can do different areas of the country with the next one. So, do you want to kick off with the first question, Tom?
I'm going to let you kick off. You asked a lot of these questions already.
I did. I haven't, because I don't have my questions in front of me and I'm looking to the left. I realized that, I just asked a bunch of these questions already. So, we did discuss that we each have our own niche. Like we do, even though we do 2-inch plugs and we do woodies and we do liners and seed, we do somewhat specialize in wetland plants, and the subcategory of that is salt marsh. Salt marsh is the largest portion of our business. We probably do more salt marsh than anything else. So that's our niche. And a lot of that's because of where we're located, but we each kind of have our own niche. And I'm curious how everyone chose the direction that you went. Like, why did you choose the size that you went, or this specific, like John, why are you doing aquatics? That type of thing. Like, just curious where we all fell into where we fell. We could start anywhere, whoever wants to go first.
I would say for us, aquatic plants, Pinelands, you guys are obviously the originators of doing this. But there's just such a need with urban infrastructure projects and stormwater management. I think that's been really a focus of new development, in the last 20 years or so, if not longer. And the reason why we do the aquatics is because, number one, there's not a lot of folks that are doing it, but also there's a high demand out there. And for ways for us to be able to impact the broader environment, for me, I believe it all starts with water quality and water. So that's really why we've maintained the focus of aquatic plants. And, and specifically in the sizes that we grow, that 2-inch plug for all of our obligate species, there's hydrology present when you're planting aquatics. So you're actually creating less disturbance by trying to dig a bigger root ball into, let's say, a mucky, sandy soil where you're planting this. So that's why we've stayed with our 2-inch plugs as well.
I think for us, that's very similar because we're doing a lot of wetland stuff, and you find with a lot of wetland plants, they tend to be on, for the most part, more shallow rooted. So it's, we didn't see a need, and we don't really expand out much into upland. We have some uplands, but not enough to create a whole different line. It just doesn't really cross over. So it was, I think, Don Knezik, truly credits a lot of what we do to environmental concern, really being his mentor and
Sure.
showing what we do. There wasn't someone in our area doing that, so we wanted to have something a little more local. And I think that's kind of where it sprouted. But Steve, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I talked about it a little bit in the introduction, but we're wholesale grower. We supply a lot of growers. So a lot of the growers put demands on us, or have over the years, and we've grown a lot of different plants, native and non-native, but to focus in on the native plants and the native plant market that we wanted to kind of continue to thrive in. For the first 20 years of my business, I had a partner, and we shared lots of conversations about where we wanted to be. And, we know that there's markets in salt marshes and super aquatic areas, but it wasn't North Creek's niche. And, we are a little bit more upland. We do marginal aquatic species. We do good ground covers, rain gardens as they kind of start to become more popular. And there was demand for those plants. We went in that market. We do a lot of ferns. So we are a very large fern grower now, and ornamental grasses. And back in the 80s, the only ornamental grass available was typically miscanthus. And so when, following in the footsteps of some of the storied nurserymen that brought ornamental grasses into prominence, they were exotic species. And early on, North Creek, had to make some decisions about who we want to be. And sure, we could make money growing exotic grasses, and we still have a couple, but when we looked at things that are invasive and non-native invasives, and I'll pick on miscanthus because I like to pick on that. And once you see invasive species, and I know it's not an invasive species thing, and I spent a lot of time on like the Invasive Species Council and helping our state with that. You can't look away. And then you start to realize how many exotic species are out there, and we don't want to be the people. I want to mediate them, and put native plants back in their place. So we found that, growing more panicums, eventually growing carex and schizocrium or andropogons, the warm season grasses. I mean, there were plenty of plants to grow and introduce back into native landscapes, and that's where we really put our focus. And had made some tough decisions, financial decisions, when there wasn't a native plant market. So I'm going back to when, this was all new. I mean, you talked about Don. He used to put classes on. We used to drive up to Columbia, and Dale and I, it's like, these are engineers. We're going into the class with the engineers, and we're the native plant guys. Who doesn't fit into this group? But man, we learned so much, and as we developed the landscape plugs and that market and it matured, we started to take a lot of our focus, and still working with the growers, but we started to really put our marketing focus into landscape architects, engineers, municipalities, nature centers, and those people that actually are the specifiers of the plant material, and let them understand that a lot of times specifiers are not plant people.
Yeah.
So they can specify plants. I know, John, you guys all probably know this, they're not available. And then whether or not you can make them available, or whether or not you can guide them into plants that do the same thing. So we do a lot of education. It was one of our values, core values, is to educate, and I think it has to be with the native plant nursery.
Yeah, just because you're a landscape architect doesn't mean that you're well versed on native plants, because there's a lot of other specialties, or an engineer. So it's still finding a means to educate those that want to go in those direction. And it's, for every nursery that feels the way that we do here collectively, there's 10 to 20 that don't. So and that's what we're fighting against, to try to change sometimes with a way of thinking. So it's nice to see that out of the 4 nurseries that are here, that 2 of them are new. So it's newer nurseries on this focus, because we need more of that as well, and it's, so Steve's comments, actually, I wrote down like 3 more questions that I wanted to throw back, but I want Daryl and Carrie to go first. And because I want to ask some of these questions to everyone after after, because the two of you could have started anywhere, and you started with 1 gallon containers and you started wholesale. So it's just curious why you chose that sizing.
1 gallons for sure was a quick turn, so we could get it out to the end user pretty quickly. And being both landscape architects, wanting to get that, have that product available to the end user was really important. There's Pinelands, there's North Creek, there's plenty of other guys out there that or other nurseries that are doing the plug that can go for restoration jobs, but not much that can go directly to your typical, commercial landscape job site or a home landscape job site. And that's kind of where we fell with choosing that size.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So where I wanted to go from that was, and while Steve was talking, it made me think of this, for as wholesalers, there's only so many nurseries that grow native plants. There's only so many customers that plant native plants. So we all basically share the same customer base, and customers may have one source that they favor over another. Do you ever get pressure from your customers to do more than what you do, to do different sizes, or they want you to take your products in another direction? We get asked, hey, can you do upland plants? Can you do this size? And it's just not in our wheel well. And you find yourself having to make business decisions for something that you feel good about. Like, do you feel that same kind of pressure?
I think we do. And I think as a new young nursery, people will come in with, one of our goals was to have a curated list of plants. We don't want to grow everything under the sun that is native or is pollinator friendly. So we make tough decisions. And a lot of times people do come in and they're like, oh, well, you should grow this one, or why don't you grow this? Or how come you don't have these? And it's easy when it's a plant that's not a pollinator friendly plant, but when it is, it's just another variety. Those are the decisions we have to make. And we have to tell somebody, yeah, sorry, we're just not going to do it. And it, depending on who you're talking to, it can be taken different ways. It can either be, hey, you guys really know your business, and I appreciate that you're giving us a curated list of great pollinator plants, or it can come down to someone looking at us going, well, you don't have the selection that I want, so I'm going to shop elsewhere. And that happens sometimes too. But I think having, our core values in place and knowing what we want our business to be, it is up to us to make those tough decisions. And if we can live with it and sleep at night, then we've made the right decision at the end of the day.
I'm sorry, Tom.
Yeah, I was going to say it's good in a way that you're doing that, because as a new business, it's really easy to, someone says, hey, can you grow this? I need 10,000 of them. And you just see the money signs in your eyes pop up. But at the same time, the majority of us here went through the Eagle program, which is a horticulturally based finance program, basically.
Leadership.
And, finance and leadership type program. And that was one of the things they really stressed was find what you're good at and stick to what you're good at, and really capitalize on that. Be the best at something, not just okay at everything.
And let's be honest, we're all, I'm sure everyone here is guilty of growing things that you like, but don't necessarily sell either. So it's, sometimes you have to kill your darlings because you're doing things because you're passionate. We all chose this niche for a reason, and we're passionate about it, but you have to make good business decisions as well to keep afloat so you can keep doing those things. So anyone else?
It's tempting. Yeah. I mean, it is tempting, especially in these first couple of years of of business, where we do get those requests for, oh, can you grow 1,000 quarts of such and such a thing? And, you look at the bottom line on it and the amount of space it takes up. And for us, we're limited by our production space. And as nice as that number looks, my accountant told me when we first started, he's like, always do what you're good at and don't do anything else. So stick with the plugs, and those are the answers we give. If I had the space, maybe, but yeah, I don't entertain most anything outside of our catalog.
And it's funny because doing, I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to add to that because what Tom said, and it goes along with just a lesson that everybody just talked about. We get a lot of pressure from growers, especially over the years, and we've been in business a long time. So there's a lot of fashion associated with new plants, and new plants, you know, there's an industry driving new plants. And we had to make a decision many years ago when we weren't necessarily making great decisions, because we would, you know, we try to be all things to all people in some regards. And you really got to put a pencil to paper. And then going through the Eagle program, one of the things that Charlie Hall, the initiator and our mentor there, you know, it was like really looking at what we were growing, how well we were growing it, why we were growing things, and then making tough decisions to say, because a lot of times, especially with the native plants, we were finding that we were always sold out of the stuff that we were known for, and we're growing a lot of these obscure things that, you know, they weren't really making money. Yeah. So a few years back, made a tough decision, and we, you know, and it's a tough decision when you have salespeople that are out there selling things, and you had to say to them, you got to tell your customer that you can't supply those 1,000 or 2,000 plants that they're looking for. We dropped 122 SKUs out of our product line. Wow. And when we were telling those customers, they said, yeah, we should probably do that too. Because everybody's growing plants, not all their plants, but there's a lot of plants that are grown that are maybe not profitable, or you don't really understand why you're growing. You're growing because you've always grown, or whatever the reason.
And one of the things I'll add is, having a smaller retail company, I always get questions on, well, why don't you grow this? Why don't you grow this? Why don't you grow? And it's a lot of, some of the stuff I have to scratch my head and say, oh, I really don't know why we're not growing that one. But a lot of the times it's something that's fairly obscure, not even that common in the natural landscape. And I've always remembered, I was at a conference and someone was talking about how people weren't growing enough, I think it was Trillium, in the nursery trade. And then they went on saying, oh, they need to be growing more Trillium. If they grew Trillium, they'd sell out of them. And then they said that it took 7 years to germinate from a seed. And it's like, well, we could sell in that same space, if it was a 2-inch plug in that same space, and if it was swamp milkweed, we could sell at least 2 flips, if not 3 flips. And now combine that by 7 years, and we're only charging less than $1 per plug. But
and that's what,
are you willing to pay that
and that's what I was
combined for a Trillium?
I was going to say, like, you know, what makes it hard is sometimes the pressure comes from when you're a wholesale, you're dealing with the same customers all the time. And being in the niche that we are, and there were so few people doing it, you have very long-standing relationships with these people. So your relationship may go back 20 years with someone, and they're asking you to do something to help them, but you know it's not necessarily a good business decision. We had someone trying to talk us into contract growing 10-gallon containers. And I had that same conversation. I was like, you know, if we do plugs, one flat covers 2 square feet, and we can flip that 2 square feet 3 times in a year, and that 10-gallon is going to sit there for 2 years, and you're not going to pay what I need to charge you for that plant. It just doesn't make sense. We're limited in space. We don't, you know, and those are the really hard decisions that a lot of people just, they may not realize that's what's going into it. You know, and that's very hard, or how long something takes to make, like Tom just said. That's that, you know, one of our driving factors is we only sell what we can grow ourselves, and we can grow from seed, or it's like 95%. So when people ask us to do something that we've never done before, there's the whole, well, we have to find the seed. We have to learn how to propagate the seed. We have to learn how to grow it. You know, there's a lot of, you know, for us, our biggest crop is smooth cordgrass. It took us 10 years to master that crop alone, you know, but you knew you could sell hundreds and thousands of them. You know, you may not be able to make that same risk for something you're going to sell 100 of. I don't know if everyone feels the same way, but that's kind of where I see it for us.
When we eliminated those varieties, one, we could grow more of what we are known for and what we were always sold out of, and try to help satisfy the market that already existed, but also gave us opportunity, because you have limited space. Everybody has limited space, you know. So how do you continue to grow more plants in the same footprint and increase varieties and all that? So by really honing down into understanding, you know, the plant material you're growing, but it gave us opportunity to do custom grow items. So if we, you know, that were worthwhile, because we knew, yes, we could get the seed, or we knew how to propagate whatever it was. And One of the things that kills, especially in you guys, the plug growers will know this, and Daryl and Carrie, you'll know it too. It's residency time, and we don't think about residency time as part of our growing. So if you grow a plant and you're growing it on speculation, and you're growing a plant that maybe hope sells but doesn't, and then you're maintaining it for X amount of time. Maybe by the time you have it for 6, 8, 10 months a year, and then you sell it at a discount because you want to get rid of it. Everything's a logic. And so if you could grow more plants that are custom grown for a job, for for non-speculative growing, your turns are faster. Your product is fresh and of higher quality. So those are all great decisions that, in a way we got, I would say forced into making, but, it was, sometimes you do things because, like I say, what you always did.
I think one thing that the retail market may not understand behind the scenes, like as we pull the curtain back, is that what we're growing has a shelf life. Especially when you're dealing with small sizes, if it doesn't move within, if you're growing 2-inch plugs, that plant is really only viable in that flat for so long, and then it has to go. So, and if you can't sell it at a reasonable price, you're throwing it out, or hopefully if you're doing other sizes, you can step it up. But it's, you hear a lot of things in the landscape trade that, we're getting things that are root bound, or we're getting things that it's hard to manage that sometimes, because you really have to manage your inventory to make sure that you're getting a good sell through every year. But you can't. None of us have crystal balls. You can try to base it on what your sales history was the last couple of years, but you never know what's going to drop out of favor or not have a job for. And does everyone else experience that as well? Like coming up with that, you just have something that has sold great 10 years and then all of a sudden it drops off and you're like, oh, what am I going to do with all of these?
There's something else that takes its place. It's, you've sold out of, Panicum Shenandoah, for instance, was really good for us. But is it going to be great next year? You make a plan like it's going to be awesome, but we learned from Eagle, hope is not a strategy, but at the same time, we kind of do hope that it's as good of a seller as it was this year. So
I might even restructure Fran's question a little bit. And I guess one of the things I've always heard, the first time I heard it, I didn't like the answer, but someone was asked what their favorite plant was, and he said it's the one that goes out on the back of the truck.
Yeah.
As I got more into the business, I realized that's very true. And but when you're looking into your year to year, what you're gonna grow, how do you decide? Oh, I'm gonna grow 10,000 of this and 1 million of this and 100,000 of this. What are some of the factors you look at to make that plan?
Yeah. What history, what we've sold in the past. So if you constantly see, 5 years of increased sales, you can kind of forecast, but it's still shooting at a moving target. That's kind of how I always did it and would continue to do it, is look at history and move forward.
I think a lot of times too, we talk to our customers. So, throughout the year, so hearing them say, looking at what they consistently buy and maybe having a conversation, hey, if we had more of those, would you have purchased more? Again, it's not an exact science. There's no guarantee. We're not going to hold anybody to committing to buying that from us and only us, but it does help to start looking at patterns within your customer base too. Oh, they always buy those. If I grew 100 more, would they buy 50 to 75% of them or not? So it's always a conversation.
Yeah, certainly sales trends, obviously, any kind of history that we have to use to base our numbers on. But then also, like Steve was alluding to, contract grows, a lot of the stuff we'll do like this time of year is all job driven, so we're actually taking contracts on stuff that we can grow, and then we'll allot, about half of our space to the contract grow, and then the other half we can allot to some speculation, based upon calculations we make with our historical sales, and then try to time that over the course of the season too. So we don't have to go into, we don't have to go into April with, 100,000 of this, but we can, say, okay, we can have, 1,000 now, maybe 5,000 in June, and then target when those plants are actually moving. It's been a struggle to do that, to come up with all those matrices, but we're starting to hone in on it a little bit better.
Following up on that, and what you guys were saying, that not all of the listeners here are wholesale growers or propagators. There is a misunderstanding especially with seed grown items, and tissue culture. I mean, all the different types of propagation, there are these timelines and windows of when plants can be produced, when they're available, if they have to go through cold moist stratification, or you have to go actually find them. And, there's all these time frames. So to what John was talking about, you have to, even Daryl and Carrie, you have to base, your assumptions on history and market trends. But you also have to do, at least for our nursery, you have to do this speculative growing, because if you sold 10,000 of something the year before, 1,000 or whatever, you just can't cut more 2x4s. You have to go plan and start the process long before anybody sees a plant. And it's complicated. It is really complicated. That's why there are not a lot of people that are showing up every day and saying, I want to be a perennial plant propagator.
A lot of our customers that you would think would understand that, we have people that will say, even on the woody side, if we supply you seed, can you give us, a 2-gallon Arrowwood viburnum next year? And we're like, oh, we might be able to give you that in about 4 years. It's because you don't, and sometimes you have time, with herbaceous plugs from seed. Some things at certain times of the year can be grown very quickly. You may not have an order, but have the seed and know that you can get it to a finished size in 2 months. And that's one of the advantages of smaller size. But Steve, I was going to mention that your nursery, probably the system you created, you probably capture more information than anyone else I know. And it's still difficult. It's not even though you have the systems and the information collected, it's still not an exact science. It's still an unknown.
It's not a science. And, we have really good people. Gordon, who a lot of you guys know, he's a number crunching guy, and we have invested a lot of money into our accounting, inventory software and such. And it's been really helpful, but cranking those numbers out, knowing who the growers are, a good example from the wholesale perspective is that if we misjudge the timing on a specific product and use a seed item, and it comes late and it misses the window where a grower wants to pot it up, we can look back. Well, we hopefully will look back on that and say, we could have sold all those, but they didn't sell because we had bad timing on getting them into the marketplace, and the grower really couldn't take those. When we had them available, they wanted them earlier. So then you might say, we're not going to grow that many next year because we didn't sell that many. Well, really, there's a lot of moving parts to consider. Plant vernalization is one, for growers. And when we have to grow plants in the summertime, hold them, put them through a cold period, the chill period, so that if somebody wants to grow them into retail, they want them in bloom, certain plants have to have that cold period go dormant. So those are factors that we have to factor in on our production schedule to see, and make sure the timing all works out.
Yeah.
Very complicated when you're doing hundreds and hundreds of items.
One thing that, if you're a nursery owner or you work in a nursery, it involves loss, and loss is a huge factor in everything we do. And there's a lot of things that are out of your control that no matter how hard you try to control, you can't control the weather, and you can't control a warm spell in late January, and you can't control an early frost.
Or a pandemic.
or a pandemic. Yeah, exactly. So it's there's a lot of challenges with, all of a sudden you're not ready production wise to start germinating this seed, but it decided to germinate on its own in the cooler, and it changes everything. Like, you have to be nimble, and there's definitely limitations. So given that, what would you say your biggest limitations are as a nursery owner or working for a nursery that limit what you do? Is there a specific factor that, hey, maybe we want to do more of this, but we can't, or it makes it hard because of these factors? I know that's a difficult question, but
How about just time, space, and labor?
Yeah,
Yes.
second that one.
Yes.
labor is something we hadn't even discussed, and labor is a huge factor, I think, for a lot of people that in our industry that doesn't get as much publicity as
Yeah, and I'll even hit on it. My mom, who's our president right now, well, actually, I'll even back up a step further. We're actually looking for some employees right now, and I'm getting a little overwhelmed with applications. And one of the things my mom always likes to say is, a lot of people, when they think about working in the nursery business, they think of, oh, I'm standing there with a watering can, and I can kind of just see it in slow motion. The water's like slowly coming out of the can. All these beautiful flowers. There's little bees and birds flying around and everything. Slow, just kind of relaxed. And that's not the case at all.
You guys are operating factories.
Yes.
And you have to look at it as, like, for the most part, it's a manufacturing facility. And I use that a lot. If you're talking to a banker that really doesn't know anything about plant material, you just start to say, well, there's our manufacturing facility and there's our warehouse. And, you're looking at the production line and you're looking at the hoop house. And, and there's our, our delivery system. So you got to look at it in universal business terms. And it's not, Dale, my partner, his family always used to call him a florist. And, it's like, no, I'm a nursery guy. I grow plants, and they couldn't get the concept up because, they when he was starting out, he was like, oh, you're growing flowers, and it's just like, they equated growing flowers into like, oh, I can go buy a bouquet of those from you sometime. And it's very different, from our end.
Yeah, everyone has a different perception. I once had a conversation, this is going back probably 20 years, with an accountant, and he was like, oh, you're so lucky you get to work outside. And I'm like, would you say that if you worked outside in the rain when it rained straight 14 days straight, and you're, and work doesn't stop because it's a rain day, it continues on. It continues on. If it snows, it's, you don't get to take a break because of the weather for what we do. And it makes it difficult. And I don't think that's another thing that people don't really associate with or think about.
And you're working with living things that are perishable.
They don't talk to you either.
And what John grows mostly open pollinated plants, and so did you guys at Pinelands. When we start to grow cultivars, and a lot of the market that it's traditional horticulture that goes into traditional nurseries and native and non-native plants. When you get into the cultivar market, there's offshore cuttings, which is a whole nother world in its own, that I would say most people don't understand, that a lot of the cuttings come from overseas. But when you start to look at a native plant nursery, and if you're doing cultivars of those, varieties that are great pollinators, like I always like, there was a question about, it was going to be a question, which I think is the crazy question. It's like, what's your favorite plant? The one that goes out the door fast. I use Phlox Gina is a great one. Native plant cultivar, it's a collected plant that had a lot of attributes, that was like, really, really one of the best pollinator plants, and it's mildew resistant. So we could sell a lot of that plant, but we can only sell a lot of that plant if we control the stock plant material, the mother plant. And what a lot of people don't understand in North Creek, especially, is that we manage hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of plants that are just our stock plants that we need to grow at specific times a year to get those cuttings to grow those plants, because we can't, we can't buy them offshore. They're not offshore. These are native plants, and for whatever reason, A lot of times they're native plants, even if they were offshore, they get dropped. And then all of a sudden our customer's like, well, why can't we have that? Well, because we were relying on somebody else, and nobody wants to ever hear that story. So we have to control our own destiny a little bit more as propagators. And it seems to be more and more nowadays. And so we have worked our systems in and trying to work more of our own stock material into our own production.
And even that becomes difficult. I apologize for just wanted to note, like, for us, we don't have a crop this upcoming year of black chokeberry because black chokeberry really didn't produce seed this year.
Mm-hmm.
So now there's just a massive gap, and I just had a job come across my desk for 8,000 black chokeberries this year. Like, what are the odds of that one? And you just don't have it, and it's not for any failure other than the plants didn't produce seed this year,
Right.
and no one can account for that. That's a plant that we always have great inventory on, or you have Ulmus rugosa that all of a sudden starts to cross with European alder in the woods, and now all of a sudden you can't get like a good source of it. Like even if you're collecting the seed, you can't control it. So there's so many limitations that just keep coming out of your normal means of control that we'd love to supply everything every year, but some years we just have gaps for 2-3 years, and it's you just can't guess it. But Daryl, I apologize, I cut you off.
That's all right. I was going to say the same, that limitation, it's labor and space, but a big one for us has been also works back to our suppliers. The supply chain is if we if North Creek or Steve or Pinelands struggles with something, then all of a sudden so do we. So because we're practicing what we've been on, do what you're good at. We're not propagators. We are finished plant growers. So getting into the propagation business is, the money we would spend and the losses we would have isn't where we want to be. So supply chain has the potential to be a huge limiting factor for us.
And some of our listeners have actually brought that up, as far as propagating some things. Like, we're very fortunate. We have a propagator I've worked with for over 20 years between here and Princeton nurseries. And a lot of that is trial and error. And there's only so many propagators, and they'll only share so much. Not everyone's going to tell you how they grow everything, because, it may have taken you 10 years to figure out how to propagate this. And they're not going to, after all that trial and error and loss and time invested, they're not going to just tell you how to do it. And we almost consider some of that proprietary information.
It's your value. Yeah, it's your value.
Exactly. We figured it out. We're able to grow it. We're not going to tell you how to grow it, because then there's no value to it. Then, we have something that no one else has. And it's hard because you do have internal issues with that too. Like, well, we would love it to be available everywhere, but we also love providing everyone a job that works here. And it becomes a hard decision. And I don't know what the answers are to those decisions. We all face those hard decisions every day, and I think that kind of leads me into my next question is what do you feel are some of the most common misconceptions that the general public has about nurseries or native plant nurseries? What they don't see or what they don't understand that doesn't really, they don't know what's going on.
I don't think the average Joe knows anything or understands anything about the nursery industry. And I have to say that before working at a nursery that grew their own plants, because I had worked at nurseries where we brought in plants and sold them, but we didn't grow anything there until I did. And really, actually, it was until I did a tour, and Pinelands was one of the nurseries on the tour, that actually opened my eyes. As a landscape architect, I had always been looking at the plant I received today and where it goes in the future. That was always, I was always planning for the future of that plant. I didn't think about what happened, how to get that plant to where I was planting it, or where the contractor was planting it. It was just kind of from there moving forward. And it was really eye-opening and amazing at how much goes into getting that plant into that 1 gallon or that quart or that 10 gallon or whatever size even a B&B tree, like how much goes into it up to that point. And I don't think the average Joe knows any of that, let alone the business end and all the decisions. And like Steve had said, that it's really, we're manufacturers. I don't think anybody realizes that at all.
No, and that's a good point. Just, when I worked at Princeton Nurseries, we were growing things from seed all the way to caliper size material. And, one of our biggest plants were ginkgo, and it would take 7 years just to get a ginkgo to a 1 3/4 inch caliper, a 2-inch caliper tree. And it's, the price on it was reflective of the time it took to grow that. And sometimes they don't see the length of time, so they don't understand the value of what, it's, I think for me, my biggest thing that I hear from people when talking to them is that native plants are such a positive thing, and nature is such a positive thing, and everyone's so happy about it, that I think they forget there's a business behind it. It's, if we love doing what we're doing, and we do many things to help, and we're fortunate we get to make a living by doing this, but you have to make business decisions. Like, you have to, there's a lot of people that work here that count on this, and it's hard, and sometimes it's conflicting, but you have you want to maintain it. It doesn't help native plants at all if we go out of business. We all need to do well and survive and grow. And I think that's my biggest misconception that I think I see.
My wife and I used to joke when we first started. She's actually my best volunteer here at the nursery. And everyone, a lot of our friends would come over and be like, wow, it's so lucky you guys get to hang out at the nursery all day and growing plants. And I would look at Erin every time they'd say that and I said, yep, just hanging out, growing plants. But no, there is so much that goes into it behind the scenes that not everyone, I think, realizes. Like winter vacation, it doesn't exist. I mean, we're actively, stratifying our seeds or cleaning seeds or actually growing crops at the moment, and it's January. So yeah, there's no downtime.
When was the last time anyone here took a spring vacation? A honeymoon, but that's different. Like it's hard for the longest time for me. It was very hard to actually enjoy April and May, and enjoy what's happening in nature, because you're entrenched in it, and it kind of takes the joy away from it sometimes, just with how crazy a spring can be. So it's not as if the nursery business is a constant stream of income throughout the whole year. There's times of the year that you're more profitable than others. You're more profitable in the spring. You're more profitable in the fall. Summer and winter are a different story.
And added to that, did I mute myself? No, I'm muted on. I'm looking at my screen. I'm used to Zoom. Added to that is when you aren't as busy. Isn't reflected. Like when you are busy, you're as busy as you could possibly be. It's because everyone wants to buy something in May.
Yeah.
That's when everyone, that first nice day in April, that's when everyone, not just you, but your neighbors and their neighbors and everyone probably in the entire country is saying, hey, you know what? I just want to plant something in my garden. And it can get really overwhelming in that time of year, just because there's so much going on. And from our perspective, that means we're putting off every project, kind of all hands on deck and getting stuff out the door, because once it shuts off, that's kind of it for a while. Yeah. So,
and it's, you can plant throughout the year. It's more difficult at certain times of the year, but it's, everyone has information that they learn from someone that may not necessarily be true, but they consider fact. So that's hard to change someone's perception, because they look at you as, well, you're profiting off of this. So yeah, you're going to have an angle, but a lot of what we're trying to explain is good for everyone. And it's, they don't always want to hear what you have to say.
I'd say too, a lot of people say, oh, well, you're in the nursery industry and you get, winters are off. It's easy time for you. You don't have much to do. And Steve, what was the first thing you said to me when we got on today? I'm like, you asked me how we're doing. I'm like, oh, we're busy, we're planning, we're doing this and we're doing that. And you're like, it's January. And, we have more time.
It's an illusion.
Right. We have more time. Things don't have to be done today, but if we don't do all of that today, come May, like Tom said, we're kind of up the creek without a paddle, so to speak. You're kind of left floundering and becoming that fireman that I know I don't want to be every day. So we do a lot of that now, and we don't get 3 or 4 months off just because it's the winter time.
You got to do all the things that you would normally do late, that you would want to do later. You have to do them now, otherwise they won't get done.
Right.
And that's what we're doing a lot now, is like, repairing stuff and being ready. You got to be ready. And if you don't take this time to be ready, boy, spring gets to be a real problem.
Right. And a lot of those things are the things not why we got into doing this that we have to do now. We got into it, we love growing plants and, supporting the pollinators, like we said, but we've got to sit behind a computer and do those sales goals and the marketing plan so we can get those plants out there too. So,
I know Tom's driving himself crazy trying to get our new website ready to go live. And we know we're crunching time because we start seeding in less than a month. Production for us starts kicking back in the beginning of February. So it's, and the other thing too is when you have multiple weeks where you're working 50, 60 hours a week, at some point you have to be able to take a break. No one can run like that all the time. So when you get a break, you have to be able to take advantage of it also. Otherwise, you're not refilling that cup. You're just running yourself down. And we've all seen nurserymen that have burnt the candles at both ends. It's not always a pleasant sight. You have to be able to refuel yourself also.
That's definitely.
Anyone, any other things on that topic?
I want to talk a little bit about misconceptions and kind of move into our next question. Is one of the misconceptions I encounter, again, through the retail side of things, is about pest and disease control. And I want to use, since we have a lot of growers right here, to talk about some of the things you're doing for pest and disease control, and maybe some of the things you've heard from the public, even some of the things that you've heard that might not be correct, and kind of set the record straight.
And I want to, before we kick into that, just real quick, since we're talking about new business owners, even though you work for Pinelands Nursery, Tom is a new business owner also with Pinelands Direct, which sells directly to the retail market. So you're dealing with it on two sides, so it's, but pest and disease is a huge concern, growing concern. I've never had so many questions about neonics and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
and I think one of the things that I just remembered was a lot of people, when they hear native plants, just kind of assume that it's organic, and that's not usually the case either. In fact, I would say, from our perspective, I don't know how we could grow millions of plants a year and do it organically. I don't know how we're neonic free, and that's a struggle, just to be neonic free. So what's some of your guys' insight on that, of how you're handling pest and disease issues, how you're staying on top of stuff, and limiting your impacts on the environment?
I'll start. I'll try to be short. We're neonic free. We've adopted, if we use chemistry, it's soft chemistry. IPM, integrated pest management, is the answer to a lot of this, because you just can't go out and spray on schedules just in case. And going back to Gordon and what he's been able to help us with, working with degree days and understanding when certain outbreaks of disease and insects happen, which is related to temperature and weather and time. He's able to put together a power pivot table that actually helps the growers, so that we use a lot of beneficial insects, and you can put beneficial insects down. When we first started out, we're hey, if there's more beneficial insects out, well, there's peak times when those beneficial insects are the most efficient. And if you're putting them down other times, so you end up spending a lot of money to feel good about being using that soft chemistry, or can't use organic, but more natural pest controls. You're not really helping anything. But then when it goes down to retail wise, and I think, where Daryl said, and Carrie talked about not applying pesticides, owning a retail garden center, we get a lot of questions that come in like, you know what this was sprayed with. I mean, when plants leave North Creek, or when plants leave Pineland or Kind Earth, we don't know what happens to those plants. They're going to go in a million different directions, and somebody else is going to take care of them or put them through a different regimen. And there are some nurseries that sell into retail that are transparent. It's great that, Gateway Garden Center here in Delaware can buy from Sunset Farmstead and know that we can tell our customers, yes, that came from Sunset, and we know that there are not pesticides on it. But that's not an industry standard. So I wish it was more like that. We do sell to some, we sell to some growers where we know how their practices are, but it's not universal through the trade. So it's a very difficult question. So I figured I'd take the first run at that, but I'm sure there's a lot of other people that can comment.
Ethics is a big thing, not like any other business. You have businesses that are more ethical and ones that aren't, and you're dealing with the range of that. So it's good for you to know who you're doing business with and their practices and get to know them. It's not just a phone call or looking on a website. You really want to know who you're doing business with so you can feel good about what you're doing, because it's real easy to depend on chemicals. It's also real hard to do without them. Also, it's a very, we didn't have a saleable crop of red maples this year because of leafhopper, and we didn't, we lost a lot of plants because of grubs, and it's difficult, and those aren't things that you want to do, but it's a reality. So it's hard. It's very hard.
And I'm going to add one thing before I kick to the rest of you guys again, but with a lot of pests, like Steve, you just mentioned, you can kind of figure out exactly when that problem's going to hit, whether it's by degree days or the weather, or just there's a lot of different factors that go into it. But and a lot of times you can take care of that issue if you just hit it perfectly. But if you're even just a few days too late, then the problem's going to be bad later on in the year. Sometimes it's just when something's laying eggs, you need to catch it right then, or if you don't, then you're going to have a big problem later in the year. And that's one of the reasons why neonicotinoids were beneficial from a nursery standpoint, because you could just apply them once or twice a year, and it really took care of all those issues for the rest of the year. The issue with them was then once they got out in the landscape, you didn't necessarily know how harmful they were going to be. And I know there's been other nurserymen I've talked to said, well, if they were really that bad, then why do I have to keep putting them down every year? But it's something from our point of view, we want to make sure that we're having as little impact as we possibly can. So that's why we chose not to do it. But that's more to give our listeners a little perspective on neonics and why they are used across most of the nursery industry, but they are being phased out.
Yeah. So like anything else, you learn what the consequences are. With a lot of the chemicals that no longer exist in the trade, no one knew what how much harm they were going to be, much like the exotic plants that we bring in. No one knew that burning bush was going to be as much of a problem as it became, or Japanese silvergrass. So it's, it takes some time to realize that the mistakes or the damage that's done.
And one of the examples we had this year was a tip moth, and we were actually finding the worms in the tips of, I can't remember what tree it was, but we're finding the worms, and you were seeing a lot of dieback, a lot of flagging in the heat of the summer from this tip moth. And there really wasn't anything you could do at that point. It was all something you had to do, I think in February or March. It was way
bud break.
Bud break. You had to hit it with the exact right formula right then. It was like a week or 2 week span that you had to treat your plants. And once the worms were in there, you couldn't do anything about it. So
so I mean, just to kind of carry on with this, Steve has mentioned, we don't we don't use any chemicals. And we started that with we're growing plants for pollinators. So we wanted to do it with knowing that there was no adverse side effects from anything we did on our property that had the potential to harm pollinators, which are basically essential for us to continue life as we know it, for so to speak, require just for food sources and up and down the food chain. So we went going into it knowing that that perfect plant that's out there that has no blemishes on it and this and that's not going to be us. First of all, it's because we're going to have some pests, but we also know that the beneficials, we see firsthand that the beneficials come in really quickly once they're there. Unlike other growers too, we don't have any hoop houses or greenhouses, so our material wakes up and goes to sleep with Mother Nature. There's no extra heat or anything provided, so sometimes our timing is more in line with when beneficials are out, whereas if you're under a plastic hoop house, you could be a little bit ahead of that game, and like Steve said, you have to add the beneficials to that system to control it.
You brought up a really good point too, and it's about public perception of what is a perfect plant, what is a good plant. And it's if an insect isn't feeding on it, I think Dr. Talamy has done a wonderful job at spreading this message. If it's not incorporating to the food web, how useful is that plant? So it's we don't do any ornamental pruning on all of any of our plants, and certain times of year plants don't look the way people think they should look. It's just they're doing their job, and it's hard to shift what you should be looking for when you're getting a healthy plant. We look at the root systems, and make sure that plant's a healthy root and that it's true to name. And it's hard to shift everyone's preconceived notions of what a plant should look like.
Yeah, you have to take some aphids with your Asclepias if you're going to grow. If you're going to grow for the butterflies,
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, John. That's one of the things, Carrie and Daryl, you guys told me when we were at your place, I think last fall, that you even had customers that were looking for aphids on milkweed plants.
Fantastic.
that they were safe for the caterpillars as well.
Yeah. It's hard. I think you said it, Fran, it's public perception of a plant. It's a living thing. They're not all going to grow the same. I don't care if you grow 2 or you grow 2,000. There's going to be variations within that. I think often people are not realizing, I think they're forgetting that it is a living thing. It's going to change throughout the year. It's going to grow differently than its counterpart that's growing right next to it. So that makes it really challenging as finished grower. It's going right to whomever is either the garden center or the end consumer, and at some point, and it'd be nice for them to realize that. But yeah, we have had customers looking if we have aphids on it, then they know that we didn't spray anything, and it is safe for pollinators.
Do you want the plant to look pretty, or do you want it to do its job? I mean, if Pinelands was paying me to sit here and look pretty, I would have been fired a long time ago. And you want the plant to perform its function. And a lot of people don't even realize, like, if you think of like white pine, which are semi-sheared, and they want that perfect looking pine, well, it grows out of that really poorly. It's not meant to be sheared, so it's a lot of these practices that may look good now are bad practices in the long, you want to look at a forest and say what trees are doing their job, and that's the way we approach it, but not everyone views it that way. And that's the hardest part. Yeah. So how do you think over time the perception has changed? Do you think it's getting easier? Is it getting harder? Is it different because more eyes are on everyone? Do you think the circle's getting bigger? Let's put it that way.
I think in many ways it's getting easier, but it's also getting harder too. Being an open pollinated seed grown, nursery, There's within the native plant field, there's obviously a divide between, you know, cultivars and seed grown plants, and oh, is it this, what ecoregion is it from? That actually makes it, in my mind, harder to reach more people when we get lost in the nuances of, you know, of deep ecology, if you will, and deep plant science. And you know, for many ways, I feel that sometimes that's a disservice. As important as it is, it's also important to be able to get more plants, native plants, whether it be cultivars or not, into people's hands and get them gardening and get dirt under their nails. You know, so yeah, it's gotten easier, but it's also gotten harder, I think, at the same time.
You know, and I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that. I just did that with one of our listeners, actually, you know, in one of our Facebook group chats. So it's, you know, you're right. You want the message to get out there, and everyone has to have a starting point. And you hope whatever that starting point is, it leads them to keep going further with it.
And it's a long, hard educational process. And when we started American Beauties and we had the conversations with National Wildlife, I'm partnered with some large growers that, you know, grow all kinds of exotic plants, and hopefully not invasive species, but cultivars and open pollinated, and bringing more plants to market. But getting in the conversation that changed, it's a paradigm shift to get people to plant and be conscious of planting native plants, whether they're cultivars or not, is like the first step. So then if you can get them, this is the way we looked at it, if you can get them hooked and get them to understand the ecology on a very elementary level, we feel that they will evolve, their families in time will evolve the marketplace to where biodiversity becomes more of common speech rather than ecological speech. And I think that's the way you got to kind of look at it, because if you start talking in terms that we maybe as native plant people or even just plant people talk about, we really lose the general public, and they kind of gloss over because they want something pretty, they want something easy, they want something that, you know. But then, you know, if you can get them hooked into this and they have butterflies and you can talk about birds and you can talk about things they can relate to, then you start to get buy-in. It's the next generation, really. It's about getting those kids involved. And I think we're seeing it. It's just, we all, you know, being the oldest guy here probably, have to be patient that, you know, it's going to happen, but it's going to take a long time, and it's going to take a long time. We're just getting started in this native plant thing. I mean, even though, I mean, the plants have been there, but, you know, biodiversity is really important. And like I talked about early in the introduction, you know, we grow specifically open pollinated for specific projects that are going to go into biodiverse landscapes or natural landscapes or undisturbed landscapes. But the majority of the people that are buying plants at retail, almost 100%, are not planting those plants in biodiverse regions that aren't on disturbed sites. And I get into a lot of debates with, not a lot, but debates with the native plant fundamentalist versus the native plant enthusiast or the non-native plant person. And it's an easy way for everybody to understand it, that it's better to have a native plant that has some ecological value to get started with, rather than thinking that you have to have like the open pollinated source into, because you're really replacing invasive or non-native species. So if it can bring a moth or bring a caterpillar, bring a butterfly, or a bird can be using that plant, you know, in the ecology to raise its young, that's a benefit. And we just got to keep that in somewhat in focus, in perspective.
Those are great points.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, you mentioned like the native plant thing really isn't that old, and we're just really starting to understand we're just starting to know what we don't know. but there has to be a space for all of these conversations together, because we kind of need each other for this to progress. And I think I see that happening probably more now than I've seen in the past. So I'm really happy for that. It's becoming more mainstream. You're seeing more articles. You're seeing it in the paper, and there's room for all of it. We all have our opinions, but I feel that
there's a lot of good work going on by a lot of not-for-profit organizations that are. One of the questions that always would come up, it was really hard to answer, and I think we're finally getting some answers. Where's the science behind it all?
Mm-hmm.
And until you can answer this stuff with science and say, oh yeah, well, this plant, does this and it has these properties, and there's these relationships. It's a lot of information to understand, and we weren't born with that. I wasn't. I grew up, got a degree in very conventional horticulture, which native plants weren't even talked about in the 70s. I mean, it was just, well, looks good, ornamental, and good flowers, fall color, and pest and disease resistance, and that's not the conversation these days.
No, I think, you shift back a few decades, people just wanted something that would survive. They didn't care if it was native or non-native. They wanted it to look pretty, and they wanted to make sure if they planted it that it lived, and that formed a lot of the choices.
I think you guys are both hitting on things right there. I mean, we're talking about the biodiversity and all that, but one thing that everybody needs is a really good success story, and something that shows that someone else has been successful with planting native plants, and they've thrived, and then in a short term they've brought the birds and the butterflies back, but at the end of the day, that plant that they bought at the garden center and took it home and planted, it lived with some care, but it's natural state, natural environment. So it wasn't, I didn't have to spray a lot, I didn't have to water it. It was fairly easy, like Steve said, and success means, oh, I'll go do it again. Whereas failure is, most people's biggest fear of getting into, a garden. So
that's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point. So I was just looking at time, and I have to start guiding us towards the end, because we've been talking for about an hour and 20 minutes. So one of the things that, and Steve mentioned this earlier, that a lot of our listeners ask is, or say that they have trouble finding plants, like where can I get native plants, or where can I get local ecotype native plants? But here we are, all wholesale nurseries. What led you to be on the wholesale side as opposed to the retail side? Now, when we had Don and Suzanne on the podcast, Suzanne said that for her, it was a very selfish reason. She didn't want to give up her weekends and evenings, and that's, being a young married couple and working that hard, that was where that focus went. What kind of led you more towards the wholesale side than the retail side? Not that your plants aren't hitting retail, they're getting there in a just different manner, but
I'm a glutton for punishment because I actually do both.
Oh.
And again, it was a decision I made early on, because I needed to create revenue so I can start to build equity to, put it back into Kind Earth so that I could, do what I did to make this happen. I still do it, but my wife has taken it over. She absolutely loves it. I personally love wholesale. COVID this past spring forced us to do things very differently, where we couldn't just have open hours and sit around and wait for people to show up and maybe buy one quart or one tomato, because we also do veggies for resale for the local community. And it forced us to be very targeted and take pre-orders like we do wholesale. So we actually implemented wholesale principles into our retail market and did pretty well with that, right? But wholesale, honestly, I like my weekends as well. I totally agree with Sue. I like my weekends, and I like downtime, on the weekends, especially on Sundays. So that's really why I focused on wholesale.
And we all have families. Not that people that do retail have families, but you make decisions based on what's best for you sometimes. And that's, how about anyone else?
I think for us, definitely it was the want the weekends off. We've already worked in industries and other companies where you didn't have weekends free. And that was a big one for us. Also, for me personally, our nursery is at my house. And unless we were going to rent, lease, or buy another piece of property to have the retail end on it, I just didn't want it to feel like the doors were open to people all the time with everybody just stopping in and checking it out. And if we wanted to have a party on the weekend or have friends over and sit outside, we could do that because we were closed. So I think that was a big factor, is that I live on the farm where the nursery is.
How about you, Steve?
Got you all beat. I started out as a landscape design build contractor in 1979, and worked a lot. And I started with like a rototiller and a pickup truck. So to what John was saying, it takes a certain amount of work to get to the fact that I liked farming, I liked growing things, and you started growing things in the backyard to complement the landscape business that I was doing. Met my former partner because he was growing ornamental grasses and liners of things that his company that he was working for weren't growing. So I started growing ornamental grasses because I wanted to put those in the landscape because I couldn't buy them anywhere. And then there weren't wholesale distribution yards. So to feed the landscape business, I kept going to buy plants, and I started filling up the backyard. And all of a sudden, between growing stuff and buying things, I had a nursery. And then you're taking care of a nursery. And then you're hiring a person to work in a nursery. And then we started selling plants and retail. So our retail business is almost 40, well, it's probably 37 years old, 38 years old.
And I apologize. I forgot about Gateway Garden Center. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I don't work weekends like I used to. I help out. I've gotten myself out, but my wife works weekends. And, we raised 2 kids, and we, had our time and vacations and stuff. I just had an opportunity when I met Dale Hendricks, my former partner, to get into the wholesale business. And when, Dale said, hey, I want to start a nursery, I had to have a whole nother education, because he wasn't talking about growing plants like Daryl and Carrie. It was like, oh, we're going to grow small plants. So, going back to the dollar per square foot conversation. And I'm like, oh yeah. And so, but we had an ecological focus. And I think that's been the driving point, is that starting out back then, even in the retail store, and taking that retail store to be more organic and selling, and not being like the hardware store and selling harmful chemicals that people put down. So it's been a mission as we evolved all those businesses to kind of like be doing the right thing and evolving our industry. But I've seen it from all those different, I don't have a landscape design build business, but we still do retail. We're open 7 days. We were closed. The idea, we were supposed to be closed in January and February retail, but I have a wholesale nursery now, so I kind of like stay busy all the time. So
over that time frame, the nursery industry has changed, and we've seen
it has.
I've joked that Pinelands Nursery is the only nursery that I've ever worked for that didn't go out of that. It's the only one that's still in business. Technically, but things have changed, and we've seen some big nurseries go under, but you've managed to maintain 2 businesses and grow with them, which is wonderful. That's fantastic. So
yeah, we keep thinking the retail is like, if we might be the last independent retail standing or something. It's just that is we're doing really well and had a great year. We are plant focused people. It's a little bit different. Very small garden center. But we have very, very committed staff, and again, we educate the public. We're in a good location.
You have a great staff there. Yeah, that definitely helps. So Steve kind of led us to how he got into the industry. So before we ask everyone their final question, and we do final thoughts, I thought I'd ask, actually, the rest of you, I don't know how you made your way into the industry, so I'm interested to hear. Carrie, let's start with you.
Okay. So I just try to make this story short, if I can. I was home. I had gone to college with no major. I was home for summer break after my freshman year. And I was at the gym waiting for the fitness instructor to show up. And there was another woman who was older than me. And she was like a real adult and I was still a kid. She started talking to me, and come to find out, she was also at college. And I asked her what was she going to college for, and she said landscape architecture. And I said, what's that? And she told me, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Our fitness instructor came. I went home, read about it, changed all my classes that fall, and turned into my career. And then from there, when I was in college going for landscape architecture, I wanted to work in a nursery so I could gain more plant knowledge. And I just fell in love with plants. And I just felt like, you guys had mentioned before, a lot of landscape architects don't know their plant material. I didn't want to be one of those people. And I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed working at a retail garden center. And just kind of all evolved from there. But the woman who, I never saw that woman again, never ran into her at college, ran into her probably 5 years ago. Her name's Carol Thomas. And she, within the past, like maybe 10 years or less, she actually bought a nursery, she bought a garden center, independent garden center over in Hamilton called Greenhaven.
Wow.
Nursery. So yeah, small world. And now she buys plants from us.
Wow, that's awesome. That's
Great story.
Yeah.
We're gonna save Daryl for last. Let's kick it over to John.
Yeah, I would say three ways actually. Well, actually 4 ways. The first way was when I was a kid kicking a soccer ball into my mom's garden all the time. She quickly made me appreciate what flowers meant, and mostly because I was crushing them with a soccer ball. But no, there were 3 people that were very influential in my career and how I got in here. The first was I did go to Del Val College for environmental design, and my professor there, Doug Kane, was instrumental in teaching us plant communities, major native plant communities, and making us design with native plants. He was so influential on me that my junior year, when he said, you should think about doing an internship at Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve, I said, absolutely, Doug, would you mind writing me a letter of recommendation? So my summer going into my senior year, I did an internship at Bowman's, all the while believing that I wanted to be a landscape architect eventually. And I spent a lot of time in the nursery with Bill Lamack, who was their propagator at the time. And I absolutely loved woodland ephemerals, and that's really the focus of Bowman's because it is a woodland garden. And I fell in love with growing. I really did, just the simple transplanting, sowing of seeds, collecting seeds. And then that springboarded me into my graduating summer, when I thought I wanted to go skiing, first of all, in the wintertime, and I wanted to go surfing in the summertime. And I was like, I better get a job so I can pay rent. And I found Randy Hefner at Aquascapes Unlimited for a summer job. And that was back in 1998. And it was in 2016 when Randy Hefner said to me, John, you should really think about buying my business. So it took about 20 years for me to actually grow up in the industry with his help. And all 3 of those people that I mentioned were extremely influential on my decision to be and to continue to be in this industry and to start Kind Earth Growers.
Those are all great people. Doug Kane is a name I hear a lot of people state as an influence, like in that time frame that went to Del Val. I've heard a lot of people throw his name out.
He was fantastic. He really was.
That's
Gone
all.
too soon. Yeah.
Yes. All right, Daryl, you are up.
Do you want the short version, the long version?
Whatever version you want.
I mean, I guess a lot of it, as a young kid, my parents had a vegetable garden, and we always helped out. I'd say, I was in, between 8 and 10, and my brother was in his early, teenage years. They gave us each a 5x5 plot in our vegetable garden and said, you can grow whatever you want, but you take care of it and it's all you. And so that was like my first real introduction into growing plants. And for a long time, I wanted to be a farmer. Friends wanted to be police officers and cops, and I wanted to be a farmer, kind of not normal for when we were growing up and where I was growing up. Then like Steve, I kind of in high school and college got into having a lawn service and, mulching and kind of landscape contracting. At one point I told my folks I wasn't going to college. I was going to do this. I had a business and it was successful. My parents said, nope, you're going to college because a college degree is something nobody can take away from you. So then I had to find something to do because I wanted to play lacrosse, but that wasn't going to pay the bills big picture. So I had to find a school that had lacrosse and something like farming. Landscape architecture came in and bam, there I was at Rutgers. Then I got to be an intern at the Rutgers Gardens.
You made a choice where you could play lacrosse, but eventually landscape architecture, you made a choice to stop playing lacrosse, correct?
Yes, landscape architecture led me to stop playing lacrosse because I couldn't do both anymore. It was both were such a time commitment that I wasn't, both would have had to suffer. And I realized that, like I said, even if I was going to be a professional lacrosse player, I still needed another job. And I wasn't good enough to be a professional lacrosse player anyway. So I, stopped playing lacrosse, focused on education, then had the opportunity to be an intern at the Rutgers Gardens. And did that for 2 years. And fortunately, right around graduation, I was all set just to go keep running with my own business. But Doc Hamilton, who was the director at that time, asked me to stay after class with him. And I'm like, what the heck did I do? Like, why am I being asked? Like, I thought I was in trouble. And trying to figure out the whole class, like what's possibly going on. And he said, so what are you doing when you graduate? And I was like, well, I'm going to just go with my business. And he said, well, how would you like to be our superintendent? The existing superintendent's leaving and we'd love to have you. So kind of thought it over and talked it through, and there I am, graduating college and being the superintendent of the Rutgers Gardens. Wow. And Doc Hamilton and Pat Kalina introduced me to so many folks, introduced me to so many plants. That's really where the idea of being a farmer always was there, but their introduction into the horticultural world and folks like Steve and Don and just so many different people really just pushed me into doing this. And through, several years later, I'm more than several, but that's all right. I'm here now sitting next to Carrie and talking to you guys. As a business owner, the two things I've always wanted was to be a farmer and to be a business owner.
Man, that's a great story.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm getting to the age where I'm starting to become very reflective on all the influences I've had throughout my years in the nursery industry, and just very thankful for all the people that kind of carried me on their back when I was younger, and it helped get me to where I am today. And it's
Mm-hmm.
Everyone here mentioned some fantastic names today, and it's nice. It's nice for those people that their names are still getting mentioned, because without them, a lot of us wouldn't be here. So I love that a lot of those names got thrown out today. So I hope someone speaks kindly of me that way.
You better straighten up quick.
All right. So
you never know, this podcast might be the thing that changes somebody and makes them want to go into horticulture. So, keep going, guys.
Yeah.
I gotta, to be honest, this podcast helped really I've said it before, but helped really reinvigorate my love for this and realized how much I didn't know and how much more I wanted to learn. So, my fiance and I were actually talking, I think, coming this fall, I don't have a college degree, and I'm going to go and go back to start working on a college degree for this field. So yeah, it's funny how things, funny how, what what inspires you, and it's who knew that it would be this podcast, so I hope it does it for someone else. All right, loaded last question. Everyone's favorite native plant. I know. It's hard, and it can change. So you're not being held to the standard for forever. You can change your answer tomorrow or even in 5 minutes. So, but if you had to pick a favorite native plant right now, what would it be? Oh, everyone.
I've got a community of native plants. I have to do it. Spigelia marilandica, Asarum canadensis, and Polystoica maricostoides, all in combination in the July garden under my beech tree. Absolutely love it.
Very nice.
Yeah, very cool.
Very nice. All right, who wants to go next?
I mentioned a plant earlier, and I think there's just too many plants and too little time. And it's really kind of difficult to kind of, it's a seasonal thing. I have a favorite plant every season. And, I just like the Phlox paniculata Gina is one that I like to pick on because I can always point it out to somebody, and it's got, if it's in bloom, it's got butterflies on it. I call it the summer blooming lilac because it had, the flowers are a little more unusual. And not that it's my favorite plant, but it's just so doggone reliable that, if you want to see a butterfly, if you want to, introduce one plant to somebody that's going to bloom in the summertime. I mean, eupatoriums are that way. I mean, there's just so many of them. It changes with the season, but I'll throw that out there because I hate that question.
I know, but we've made it. It's a tradition now, so we have to ask it. All right, Daryl and Carrie, who's next?
So I'm thinking of two plants for similar reasons. One is echinacea, and one is Asclepias, butterfly weed. Both because of the pollinators and the other critters that are attracted to it. So the echinacea, you've got all your bees, your butterflies that come when it's in bloom. It's a beautiful flower. It's a more recognizable flower for average. Most people kind of know what that is, that coneflower look. But then I actually really like it when the cones turn to seed, and then I get to watch all the small songbirds come, and it's nice to see it feeding insects in the beginning when it's really pretty, and and I enjoy looking at it, and then later on feeding the bird population. I just like watching that. And then I'd say butterfly weed for the same, Asclepias for the same thing, is just the flowers are fine. I don't love them like I like echinacea flowers, but I feel like there's always a teaching moment. You can go up to it when it's actively growing, and there's just always something on there, whether it's the aphids, whether it's green lacewing, whether it's lady beetles, or it's the caterpillars. Like there's just always something happening. It's just so active. So and I think that's really fun to show somebody, like, look at what's going on here. This is the predator species, this is the prey species, this is what's happening, this is the purpose of that plant, this is why this one's not touching it, and this is what's feeding on the flowers, the nectar in the flowers. And I just love, it's just exciting, I guess, to see that progression, and then to see that plant look awful and you think, oh, it's not coming back. And then next spring, late spring, there it goes. And you get to watch that whole cycle again.
Those are great choices. And I think butterfly weed is a great gateway plant just for people. That's one of the first native plants a lot of people to, learn. So it's very important that way. All right, Daryl, it's all you.
I definitely don't have anything that's maybe as beautiful as Carrie described right now. It's just, I'd say my favorite plant definitely changes throughout the year. And right now it's definitely Pogon Virginicus. We have it in the back of our property at my house. We kind of created a little bit of a meadow area, and it's still standing up tall. It's kind of that beautiful bronzy brown color. And I mean, as much as everyone's like, oh, beautiful and brown doesn't really go together, but there's something special about it. And it's also like, I think about it, it's old field succession. It's a sign of hope. It's one of it's an early plant to come in as things are transitioning from either, disgraced landscape and moving forward and being reclaimed, or it's a forest edge or the side of a farm field that's been let go. It kind of comes back first. And I look at it now as it's a big sign of hope of what's to come for next year or this coming season. And like I said, we had snow and a heavy wet snow here, and they were covered laying down, and they're bounced back up at 3 feet right now. And it's just really, it's just cool. And then to see my kids run through it also is kind of neat too. So I can see them playing and interacting. So,
on a side note, so I'm colorblind, and a few years ago, Don and the folks at the nursery as a surprise bought me a pair of colorblind glasses to correct color blindness. So, which I had no idea was coming, but the color that broom sedge gets in the winter was not a color that was in my palette. So I never appreciated that color before. I love, I know it's funny, but I love that color. Like that's very special to me.
Really
now.
the way like the sun hits it on a day like today in New Jersey, it really just pops.
Yes.
And you guys, for those watching, you can watch that video of when we gave Fran the colorblind glasses.
Oh, that is on our YouTube page. I
it's
cried.
on our YouTube page.
Spoiler,
So-
I cried. So, all right. So, final thought. This is we end each podcast where we give everyone just the floor for a minute. Just if there's anything you want to expand upon, anything that
you wish people at home knew that kind of thing.
You wanted to summarize, anything, however you want to use that time. Now's the time. We're going to start with John. And we'll work our way through.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think a lot of things I think about a lot are the responsibilities, right? As a nurseryman and as a grower and as someone who's putting these native plants out into the landscape is, I think we did touch upon it a little bit, is that Steve certainly has too in his, commitment to education. Our responsibilities go beyond the growing and the producing. It goes to making people be successful. And like Daryl was saying, everyone needs that one victory, right? Because it's so easy to turn away after one that, once they get a second victory and a third victory, all of a sudden we have a gardener who's committed, who's coming back year after year, and who's also talking about it. And I couldn't stress that more, believe that more in my own mission here at Kind Earth is to really make people successful in gardening and using native plants so that we can grow more and create more habitat for all the birds, bees, and bunnies that we all love.
Awesome. Daryl, how about you next?
I think I would kind of second that a little bit is making people successful and giving people stories. But I think I had a thought. Now I can't.
That's my typical final thought.
It's just the idea that is what we're planting something today, and it's not necessarily for everybody that's listening to this tomorrow. It's what we're planting today for, our kids or grandkids is what is being responsible and ecologically responsible for the world for the long term. So let's really think about that as we're enjoying our gardening and planting what's pretty and that, but think about the whole big picture value at the same time.
All right, Carrie, you're next.
Mine is really basic. Mine is to tell people to stop being afraid of bugs. It's so basic, and I think it's something that we forget because of what we do, and we are outside, and you see something crawling around, and instead of fleeing and screaming, our reaction is to let's investigate, go in. But I have friends, and I see it a lot where there's something moving, and it's, I got to spray it. I got to kill it, step on it, do something. And I encourage people to stop being afraid of insects, start investigating and being interested in them because they are so important. And we're not going to be able to continue doing what we're doing if we don't if we continue to kill them all the time. So that's that. I think once you start with that and you suddenly aren't afraid, you start realizing how many beneficial insects there are and how many insects who really don't care about us. They're not all out to kill us. They're just going about their daily business and living their lives and doing what they need to do. And we just happen to be around. So I implore people to stop being so scared of insects.
All right, Steve, you are next.
I want to first start just by wrapping up and saying thank you and for what you're doing here and including us all and having the conversation, because I think all of this really evolves around having more and more conversations to get more interactions with more people. And that's really what it's all of our jobs. And to follow with what everybody has really said is, I think it's important that we continue to figure out how to try to change the paradigm here and what landscapes look like. And what we grew up with is a little bit different than what we're trying to convince people or show people or educate people as to what how nature can be beautiful in its own right. And when we think about but everything we drive around and we see every day, and like I said, once you see things, it's hard to look away.
Yeah.
If you can, our mission really as nursery people and native plant enthusiasts should be really out there changing people's perception of beauty, and not changing it, but exposing people to that shift to where the Pogon in the winter landscape, or the fall color of and the textures and movements and summer meadows. I mean, when people ask about the native plants and when we started like American Beauties and such, I look at people's catalogs, the wholesale growers, and I say, man, you guys, we have all been growing and selling and installing native plants. That really isn't the issue. It's just that no one called them native plants. Nobody understood where they came from, the ecology of, and they're some of the most beautiful plants that were part of conventional horticulture. They're in their moment now. And I think our job is to carry that mission forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Tom, would you like to go or you want me to go?
Oh, I'll go.
Okay.
Yeah, mine's not.
Oh, you're making me.
Fan. Yeah,
okay.
You have to have the good wrap up.
All right.
When we started talking about doing these rooted discussions, these were round tables with larger groups, some of it was selfish just so we could have some of our friends on that were in the private industry. Not our main mission was support a lot of the NGOs, but there's a lot of this stuff that's going on in the private industry as well. And one of the reasons we chose this one to do first was because, like I mentioned, they're a lot of our friends to start out, but they're also living that message in addition to having a career in that message. So everyone's here in this group and outside of this group as well. They're growing native plants, not just because they can make money off of it, but because they really love the habitat aspect of it and creating new ecosystems and all that. And that's really it. I have another thought, but I can't.
Okay. All right.
That's
all right. I'll wrap it up. I'll try to be brief.
Yeah.
So everyone on this podcast today all took different paths to get here, but in the end, we're all here, and we're all stewards, and take to heart everything that we talked about. And in the process, we threw out a bunch of names of people today that helped us get here. We all needed help to get to this place. So just take that to mind, that we want more people to get to this place. So where you were helped, it's now our turn to help other people get to that place. So whatever that means, like I said, there's rooms for all of these discussions. There's room for all different ideologies. If we're going to make a difference, we really need to get more people involved. So I hope that I can do for other people what was done for me and help more people get to this. And just, it's a serious thing. It really is. It's a nice thing to talk about, but we have to take it serious and help get other people to this place. We it will be a fun party when we're all when we're all here together. Yeah. So I think that's it, Tom.
Yeah.
You want to wrap it up?
So that really wraps it up. We want to thank you guys for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed listening to our first Rooted discussion. For more information about the nurseries that joined us today, visit the Native Plants Healthy Planet website for links. That's www.nativeplantshealthyplanet.com. Again, thank you for listening to Native Health. Brian, I gotta go this back and forth.
It's okay. It's weird getting back into this.
Yeah, it is. So thank you for listening to Native Plants Healthy Planet, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
Big thank you to all of our guests today. If you're in the Mid-Atlantic or the Northeast and you've been to a restoration site, more than likely the plants there have come from one or all of these places. So there's a lot of beautification that's been going on between this collective group right here. I would love to give a big thank you to RJ Comer for contributing our theme music. Just a reminder, if you want to submit original music to be featured on future episodes of Rooted Discussions, send them to info@nativeplantshealthyplanet.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Pineland Nursery, Facebook at Pinelands Nursery NJ, Instagram at Pinelands Nursery, and YouTube at Pinelands Nursery. Don't forget, we have the question and answer line, which everyone's been using. We're happy to hear that. Call us at 215-346-6189. I'll repeat that, 215-346-6189. Ask a question or leave a comment. If we pick your question or comment, we will play it on a future episode of The Buzz and answer it at that time. Let's not also forget, we did mention the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group. I'm sure we'd love to continue this conversation over there. So if you have any questions, please make sure you join the group and post the question there.
And we're going to ask for some listener feedback. Actually, I guess it's not even feedback. We need to have like the deep dive into foraging. So we're going to post something in there, and we're looking for your guys' reasons why you're interested in foraging through our Facebook group, so we can ask our guest.
You want to say who it is?
No, not yet.
Okay.
We got to keep that one a secret.
All right. And we have some great guests coming up in the near future.
So again, you guys can listen to Native Plants Healthy Planet directly at www.nativeplantshealthyplanet.com. Also check us out on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, really wherever you consume your podcasts. You can even ask Alexa to play the Native Plants Healthy. Man, I can't say, there's too much alliteration. You could even ask Alexa to play the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast. When you're signing up or going to listen to all these, make sure that you hit subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Let us know how you like the Rooted Discussions format as well.
We'd love to do more of these.
We had a lot of fun, and it really lets us dive deep into some different topics that we might not get to talk about with our normal format.
This was everything I had hoped for today.
It's
everything that I had hoped for. So, and if you're in a friend's house that has an Alexa, make their Alexa play.
Steal their phone, hit subscribe. It really does help when you do that. So with that, I'm Tom.
And I am Fran. Thank you again, everyone, for listening. And a huge thank you to all of our guests. Thank you for taking time out of your day, busy day, to spend time with us today. Coming up on the next Buzz, we'll be having a conversation. We did get a call from Saul, and he had questions on cultivars.
That's right. We promised in the last Buzz that we've been talking about cultivars enough. And maybe we do a Rooted discussion on cultivars.
That might be a great idea. That might be a great idea. So that's about it. We'll be talking about that. Make sure you tune in. And until then, keep it native.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.